Wake up!
Peace, brothers and sisters. I'm coming to you today because we're post-election, and apparently Trump is going to be disputing the election results, so we're going to be sending the country into a tailspin in regard to that. But what I want to touch on more importantly is what happened as a result of the election. The post office was involved. If you all remember, this administration was making attempts to corrupt the post office in that they were removing mailboxes, closing post offices early, reassigning workers, delaying mail, essentially just corrupting the system. But the post office was what was originally in place to form our original government. So in this new series that I'm going to be doing called the Truth Seeker series, let's explore some of the more important aspects of being a creditor, a secured party creditor, and how the tools of our government can be used to affect our private processes while we effectively control the public from the private side. So let's take a look. The first post office, this is a picture of it from Greenfield, Massachusetts. Apparently, this is the post office that was established in 1775. But when we go to the post office's website and we look at some of the original post offices, we'll see, yes, most of the originals were set up in 1775, but I believe that there may have been a post office set up earlier than that. And this was in 1753 in Philadelphia with Benjamin Franklin. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the first post office, let's see here. Postmasters were appointed in Cincinnati and Marietta in early June 1794, making these the first two post offices to be officially established. A postmaster for Gallipolis was selected by late July 11th. Joseph Rogers, the first postmaster, served as postmaster by November 25th, 1792. His appointment date is unavailable. But when we go down here and we see, when people ask, where was the first post office? Clearly, Philadelphia was the first. Benjamin Franklin was the first postmaster. Franklin, he was a meticulous record keeper. He was so skillful at running postal operations in Philadelphia that in 1753, look at that, not 1775, 1753, the British Crown appointed him as joint postmaster for all 13 colonies. Let's read that again. That's very important. The British Crown appointed him as joint postmaster for all 13 colonies. So from what we know from high school history lessons, we knew that, we were at war between the British in regard to this particular country, and we were fighting for our independence as a result of the British Crown being in rule at the time. So you'll notice here that it says joint postmaster. So who is the other postmaster if this Benjamin Franklin was a joint postmaster? So that is the British government was the original postmaster, because they had brought all of their laws here, the common law, the Bar Association. And now let's take a look at something else that's very important in his statement. The British Crown appointed him as joint postmaster for all 13 colonies. The number 13, we've been socialized and conditioned to believe that 13 is a bad luck number. We've had movies, Friday the 13th. We always see 13 as a sign of bad luck. But if you look at the back of the dollar bill and look at the pyramid, there are 13 steps. That's because they represent the 13 original colonies. They didn't want the number 13 to be used, and even in architecture, and I studied architecture and have degrees in architecture, but even in architecture, they teach us that there is no 13th floor. And the reason being is because they wanted 13 to be that sacred number, and that there to be no other 13 other than the original 13 colonies that brought about this particular country and this republic, and the way that this republic was formed. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention in regard to the post office. But now let's take a look. Let's go a little further down. Now it says, who owns the post office? The Secretary of State for Business, Innovation, and Skills. Secretary of State for Business, Innovation, and Skills owns the post office. Okay, well, what does that mean? All right, let's take a look. See what it says. The Secretary of State for Business, Innovation, and Skills, and you'll see it says United States Postal Service. It says here the United States Postal Service, USPS, known as the Post Office, U.S. Mail, or Postal Service, is an independent agency of the executive branch of the United States federal government responsible for providing postal service in the United States, including its insular areas and associated states. But wait a minute, let's take a look at that again. The Postal Service, all of them, Post Office, U.S. Mail, Postal Service, is an independent agency of the executive branch of the United States federal government. All right. So the Secretary of State for Business, Innovation, and Skills. Let's see here. Let's go back because that's important. So who owns the post office? Let's see. Let's click on this and see. The Department of Innovation and Skills on Wikipedia. Let's go a little deeper. The Department for Business, Innovation, and Skills, the BIS, was a ministerial department of the United Kingdom government created on June 5th, 2009 by the merger of the Department for Innovation, Universities, and Skills and the Department for Business, Enterprise, and Regulatory Reform. It was disbanded on the creation of the Department for Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy on July 14th, 2016. So the post office and the postal service, U.S. Mail, is owned by the Department for Business, Innovation, and Skills, which is now the Department for Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy, owned by the United Kingdom. So if we look here to the right, preceding department, Department for Business, Enterprise, and Regulatory Reform. That is now the name of this particular department, Department for Innovation, Universities, and Skills. Those were the preceding departments. It is now the Department for Business, Innovation, and Skills. Where is it located? Company House. Let's see here. Let's go back here. Let's see strategy development. It says here jurisdiction, United Kingdom. Okay. So now when we go back and we start talking about how the post office was used to form our government, but the post office was owned by the British Crown because essentially everything was owned by the British Crown before we went to war and declared our independence and formed the United States of America Corporation, so forth and so on. So, but still, it begs the question, okay, if they own the post office and the post office is still delivering our mail, then we have some situations where we have to pay attention to the fact that our post office is not owned technically by us. However, it is used by us to move our commerce and our mail. So with that being said, we had to declare our independence. I see why we had to declare our independence from the British Crown, because they were going to conquer this land the way that they've done pretty much all of the other lands across the world until we declared our independence. All right, so again, I downloaded this document here where it shows all the original post offices and where they were created. Okay, cool, we got it. So let's talk about that, because the first post office, if we go down, we see that this is owned by the Secretary of State for Business, Innovation, and Skills. This is out of the United Kingdom. They've had their hand in our pocket since our very beginning. And then when you go down to the bottom, there's another point I want to point out with the post office. You have to learn how to use the post office and all of their services. So they have on their website, this webpage, I'll try to put it in a link description for this particular video, but it's all of their services, insurance and extra services, add proof of mailing, delivery confirmation, and more. But when you go down, it shows you what these services are, and it gives you an explanation of what these services provide and how you can use these services for yourself to get these things done. I recommend that you do this because as a private banker, you want to effectively use the post office and the postal service. You should not have to walk into any court. You should not have to walk into any governmental office. You should be able to effectively get all of your remedies taken care of through the mail. Certified mail in particular is very important. Certified mail, you can purchase it at your post office. You present for mailing to a postal employee. If it's a postmark sender's receipt, is requested. You combine with return receipt to get an electronic or physical delivery record showing that the recipient's signature, and the recipient may be required to show an acceptable primary ID before USPS will deliver the actual mail piece. But more importantly, it's proof of delivery, and it's a certified official process. So this is the process that courts use. This is the process that banks use. It is the process that attorneys use. So you want to use it as well because it is a well-respected process and it's official. You get tracking and all kinds of other features involved with return receipt. So also, return receipt, you want to know what that's all about, how to fill out these forms correctly, certified mail, certificate of mailing, signature confirmation, the premium tracking, registered mail. You definitely want to learn about registered mail because if you're moving your promissory notes and things like that overnight, you want to do that via registered mail, or you can just do it via overnight mail because you know it's tracked every single step of the way and it's guaranteed by 12 p.m. the next day or you get your money back. Not a problem. But again, then they have signature services like signature confirmation, restricted delivery, adult signature required, adult signature restricted delivery, and collect on delivery, which is COD. So again, learn the post office. It's very important. It's going to be very instrumental in you becoming a very successful private banker. So again, we talked about the first post offices, but now let's talk a little bit more about declarations, because declarations are very, very powerful, very powerful. We got the Declaration of Independence. We're going to look at that in a minute. But what I want to do first is just go into declarations so that we understand what declarations are all about. So the definition, a formal or explicit statement or announcement. Okay, the formal announcement of the beginning of a state or condition. A list of goods, property, income, etc., subject to duty or tax. And that's where you make a declaration. If you're coming back into the United States, you're going to declare whatever property you purchased while you were out that may be subject to duty or tax. And it's usually liquor and some of the other things that you see. But that's what the declaration is in terms of a definition. So, but let's look over to the right here where it says declaration in law. In law, a declaration is an authoritative establishment of fact. Declarations take various forms in different legal systems. Let's go deeper. So let's click on that and see. So I like the fact that Wikipedia is going to give it to us under canon law, common law, European law, declaratory legislation, other legal issues, external links, references. Okay, so let's take a look. Under canon law. In the canon law of the Catholic Church, a declaration of nullity, commonly called an annulment or less commonly a decree of nullity, is authoritative judgment on the part of an ecclesiastical tribunal juridically establishing the fact that a marriage was invalidly contracted, or less frequently, or judgment juridically establishing the fact that an ordination was invalidly conferred. It does not dissolve a valid bond of marriage, but it is merely a factual declaration of the nullity of the bond. Okay, that's under canon law in regard to a declaration. Common law. In common law, a declaration ordinarily refers to a judgment of the court or an award of an arbitration tribunal that is a binding adjudication of the rights or other legal relations of the parties, which does not provide for or order enforcement. Okay, got it. All right, so in other words, just a declaration, basically an affidavit that's going to give an actual order, but it's not going to give an actual order for enforcement. Where the declaration is made by a court, it is usually referred to as a declaratory judgment. Less commonly, where declaratory relief is awarded by an arbitrator, it is normally called a declaratory award. Declaratory relief is most commonly seen in two particular circumstances. Applications for declarations of legitimacy in family and probate legal proceedings, and under insurance policies for the determination of whether a peril is covered by a particular policy. Then they have it under European Union law. Then they have it under declaratory legislation, where they're saying it's an act of parliament or other statute in declaratory if it purports to state authoritatively what is the current state of affairs. So in other words, it's an authoritative sworn statement of affairs. So like you get your Declaration of Independence, this is a sworn statement. You have to be a signatory to it to declare these particular actions to take place. Okay, so now let's go down here and other legal uses. This is important. In some legal systems, a declaration is similar to an affidavit. In some legal systems, a declaration is similar to an affidavit. Okay, in relation to companies, a declaration is the first step in relation to distribution and payment of dividends. In trust law, which we need to be paying attention to, a settlor, which is us, we are the OR, executor, grantor, settlor, who declares that he holds certain property on trust is said to make a declaration of trust. Okay, so when we establish your trust for you, that's what you see in the beginning of your document, said your declaration of trust. That document is very, very powerful because you declared that particular entity into existence. Dying declarations are an exception to the rule against hearsay in many legal situations. Declarations against interest are also an exception to the rule against hearsay in many legal situations. A formal declaration of default is required to enforce creditors' security rights in some legal situations. That's important. A formal declaration of default is required to enforce creditors' security rights in some legal situations. So that means we, as secured party creditors, must understand how to declare something in default. And that is why we exhaust our administrative procedure, conditional acceptance, give them the opportunity to acquiesce and quietly agree. Then we send them the notice of fault, an opportunity to cure, giving them notice that they are at fault, and giving them the opportunity to cure that fault under a certain amount of days, usually 10 days. They're not going to respond because they didn't respond to the first conditional acceptance where they had 30 days. So if they don't respond to the first, they're not going to respond to the second. They don't respond to the second, that's where we can declare default. That's where we file the affidavit notice of default, which is this here, what we're seeing. A formal declaration of default is required to enforce a creditor's security rights in some legal situations. So again, that's where we're going a little bit deeper with the declaration and the default. So an affidavit, you know how I'm very, very strong on my affidavits and how we must master our affidavits. So your affidavit is synonymous with a declaration. Declaration is synonymous with an affidavit. You have to have some witnesses if you don't have a notary. Notary is a witness, so if you have a notary, you're sufficient. But if you don't have a notary, in the mouth of two or three, so shall every word be established. So all you need is two additional witnesses to witness you signing and have them sign along with you, and you've consummated the document as though if you had a notary there with you. Or you can just use the simple statement, I declare under penalty of perjury without, in all capital letters, without the United States. And all of the above is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. Something along those lines. But as long as you have that in there, you won't need a notary. You can make your declaration. So let's go back from that. Now, let's go back to take a look at these declarations here. Let's see. Declaration. Let's see. I'm going to go back because there was a piece that I wanted to go over with the National Archives. So the Declaration of Independence can be found at archives.gov. This is the very same declaration that Thomas Jefferson, John Hancock, Benjamin Franklin, all of those gentlemen were a signatory to. Most people don't know that when you go to the American founding documents at the National Archives, there's a link over on the left that allows you to sign the Declaration and or the Constitution. I recommend you do it. I've done it. It gives you the ability to sign in a particular font, penmanship style. You type your name. Obviously, you want to put BY colon, your full name. So let's do that. BY colon. Let's do John hyphen. Let's see here. Let's just do John full colon Doe to save time, comma, agent. Okay? And there we have it. So, again, you'll see you have the ability to punch your name in the way you want it to appear. Then you choose the actual font. I'm going to choose Patriot. And then here you'll see it says, are you sure you want to sign a Declaration of Independence? This is really good. Overstand this, folks. This is important. And the reason why I want you guys to do this and print this out, accept it for value, and add it to a UCC3 and send it to up to the Secretary of State to be added to your UCC1 so that it's public record, so that you have unequivocal proof that you are a signatory to this particular contract. You've reserved your rights on this contract. You've accepted for value this contract, and you have now public record by adding it to your UCC3. And if you got your ID with us, then you'll be able to go ahead and have it scanned through your ID and go directly there so that you can see it yourself. So let's go ahead and click on yes, I want to sign. So now you'll see the actual Constitution come up. What did I choose? I chose Declaration of Independence. So here's the Declaration of Independence in its glory. But look at the bottom. My signature is there. I can now download this image, print this image, accept for value with my banker's acceptance stamp this image, and send it up on a UCC3 to be made public record so that I have public proof that I am a signatory to this image. And yes, you have the ability to do this. Yes, you do, because you are an original creditor of this country. Are you not? Because if you're not, don't sign it. Don't worry about it. Don't do it. Doesn't even apply. It's not a requirement, but just think about the efficacy of doing it. These are both contracts. Everything around us is contract. Most of the courts that you walk into, and some people start yelling, oh, you're violating my constitutional rights. The judge gets upset. Don't bring up the Constitution in my courtroom. That document doesn't apply here, and you're not a signatory to it. But what if I am a signatory to it? And what if I do have a copy of it with my signature on it? So now you are definitely violating my rights in that regard. But again, you also want to have this done because you want to be an original creditor of this country. And then what I would do with the signed copy, after you make the color copy to send up to New York State, because they're going to keep it, or wherever you file your UCC1, you want to send it there so that they can keep it and add it to that one so that they have a public image of it. But you take your original and you frame it. Yes, you take it and you frame it and you put it in your office. And if there's ever an issue, you can always show it to whomever you need to. Make multiple copies of it because, yes, this is a legitimate document. Yes, you have the ability to sign it because you're here. You're an original creditor. You're an American citizen. You're an American national. You're not a U.S. citizen. You're an American citizen. Okay, it's a big difference. Okay, so that's that. That's this particular document. But let's go back to this document because it's very important. Most people have never read this document. And shame on you if you have not. I know Yusuf L talks about it a lot. Shout out to Yusuf L. He talks about the fact that most people don't read, or if they do, they have the attention span of a goldfish. So they'll read for about 5 minutes and then they'll forget everything they read and move on to the next subject and just wash, rinse, and repeat. Focus, people. Focus on the important things. Know these things and know what's going on. So you'll see we're just going to go through this briefly. We're not going to read a lot of it. We're just going to go through it because it's not a lot to read, to be honest with you. But just to be able to say that you have actually read it is something special because you'll see what was going on. You'll truly see. And we're just going to read the first portion of it and the last portion of it so you can really see what was going on. So you'll see here it says, in Congress, July 4th, 1776, 4th of July. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Notice united is lowercase. When in the course of the human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, who are they talking about, the British, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Deriving their just powers from the consent. Give them your consent and they will govern you, of the governed. that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. So they would rather just settle if they're being taken advantage of. They would rather just be complacent if they're the victims of tyranny. Okay? So it's important to understand that this document is telling you what was going on back then, and it's going to really reflect what's actually taking place now. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, stealing, taking people's wealth, pursuing invariably the same object, look at object as a capital O, evidences a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in a direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And this is where they lay out their facts. You notice there's an indentation as these particular facts are being laid out in this document. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation and legislator, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of the public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with many firmness his invasions on the rights of people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of newer appropriations of land. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to the laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their office and the amount of payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and set them hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislators. He has affected to render the military independent of the superior to the civil power, and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, given his assent to their acts of pretend legislation. for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment by any murders which they shall commit on the inhabitants of these states, for the cutting off of trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretend offenses, for abolishing these free systems of English laws in neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries as so to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule in these colonies? Again, folks, read this document. You'll see what the British were trying to do to us, that we stepped up and said, no, 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 no. We're going to declare our independence. Now, the last paragraphs, very important. Just like the entire document is very important, so I implore you to all read it. But I don't have a lot of time because I have some consultations to do, and I want to make sure that I get this done for you as well, because this is important. I'm going to be doing this new series called the Truth Seeker series, where we go back to make sure that we find out what was going on then, so we can effectively find out what's happening now, so we can also know what may take place tomorrow and prepare accordingly. So the last paragraph, we therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, notice that the word united is lowercase, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they be absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. And then you'll see everyone who's a signatory to this particular document from all the states. It's actually 15 states that were represented at that particular signing, but it was 13 states that originally formed the document. You'll see Massachusetts, John Hancock. You'll see New York, William Floyd, Phil Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris. You'll see Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, Samuel Adams, John Adams. You'll see Thomas Jefferson. And again, you'll see Benjamin Franklin from Pennsylvania down at the bottom as well. But you, too, have the ability to sign this document, accept it for value, add it to your UCC1, keep it on you if you want to. But again, this is your Declaration of Independence. You click on this link here to say where you want to join the signers of America's founding documents. Sign it, print it out for yourself, and take it from there. Again, this is the Truth Seeker series. I want to go back and I want to make sense out of nonsense as it relates to what's going on around us. So knowing about the Postal Service, knowing about declarations, knowing about the Declaration of Independence and what was going on is all relative and important to being a secure party creditor and making sure that you know the truth.
Control everything and own nothing.
In the history of this nation, have so many people been for the cause of freedom and human dignity. Now let me say this, keep this movement going, keep this movement rolling. Long as we keep moving like we are moving, the power structure will have to give in. In spite of the difficulties,